Welcome back everybody to the afternoon session of the Future Forum. Our first speaker this afternoon is Rhys Howard, and Rhys is a Moss Vale local. Some of you may know him already. His business is Highlands Insulation. He's the founder of Highlands Insulation, which is based in Moss Vale. It specialises in thermal and acoustic insulation solutions. With a focus on energy efficiency and comfort, Rhys provides expert advice on insulation strategies that enhance building performance while also meeting or exceeding code requirements. So welcome to the stage, Rhys.
Thank you. I'm here to answer this question because we all know it's true. We all know that our homes are absolutely freezing. You know, we might have friends or family come over from the US or Canada and they go, oh, I've never been so cold than when I've come to Australia. And you don't need to take my advice for it. The World Health Organization knows it too. So they've got a very large document that if you guys really want to get into, you know, home comfort and home mortality rates, they know that homes in mild climates are actually colder than homes in very cold climates. And the Highlands is definitely one of those areas. Sydney is too, but really homes, especially older homes in the Highlands, they're built really the same as homes in Sydney and they need to be built better. So 18 degrees is our target temperature for an indoor temperature for a home. I drive around the Highlands every single day. I'm meeting people every single day. I'm welcomed into people's homes. Very rarely do I ever find a home that is comfortably maintaining 18 degrees. I meet people who sleep with beanies on, for example, you know, who wake up in the morning and their breath is condensating in front of them in the bed. And I'm here to help solve that problem. I won't get bogged down in it, but realistically, the reason that that's happened is because the building code and national construction code in the past hasn't been really well adapted to climate. It's really more about cost in the past. That's changed now and new homes coming through are built much better than they were at the past. But most of the homes in the Highlands were built pre-2010 and thermally they're not up to scratch. The best example I can say of this is that the Australian Building Code Board, the ABCB, has Highlands categorised as Climate Zone 6, which is the same as Jervis Bay, which is really incredible. So if you, and anyone can do this, it's really fascinating. You can go on the Australian Building Codes Board website and have a look at the climate zone maps all around Australia, and you'll see that the Highlands flows down into Jervis Bay, which, you know, if you've ever driven to the beach, it's very different. All right, so home comfort really starts with insulation. That's the key. A lot of people, they might know the basics of insulation. I'm not going to go too deep, but I'm going to give you the basics just so that when we continue down and talk about the rest of what we're going to talk about today, we all understand what we're talking about. So insulation is any material that slows the transfer of heat. It doesn't need to be traditional bats. You know, even timber can be a reasonable insulator as long as it's slowing transfer of heat. So the way that we measure that is in a laboratory. Building materials have a measured thermal conductivity, and that's attributed a K value. The K value times the thickness of the material gives us the R value. Now, most of you have probably heard of R value. You will see it on packets of insulation. If you're going to Bunnings, you might see Earthwall, and it's telling you R2, R3, R4. What does that mean? Really, it's a measure of resistance value, which is the K value, or our thermal conductivity, times the thickness of the material. And the reason R value is used is because it allows us to compare all insulation products equally. So if you've got a polyurethane foam panel and a glass wool bat, and you're tossing up which one to use, you can just look at the R value. The R value will tell you how good an insulator it is. Why we use insulation is because it keeps our homes, you know, seems very obvious, but it keeps homes warm in winter and cool in summer. It simply slows transfer of heat. So if we've got lots of radiant heat coming in from the sun, it's going to slow that heat entering our homes. If we're heating our homes in winter, it's going to slow the loss of that heat Passive house is a really good example of that, where almost just the warmth of someone's body is enough to heat a home. It's so well insulated. Again, insulation is reducing the need for active heating and cooling, and in insulating, we equally are doing this for comfort as well as energy efficiency. We need to be comfortable in our homes. We need to be getting our homes around that 18-degree level really to be healthy. So we've got many different types of insulation. I'm certainly not going to go through all of them, but these are the common ones that you might see, that you might be talking to a builder, you might be renovating, you might be walking around Bunnings, you might be talking to me at your home, and I might be tossing around terms, or someone might be tossing around terms of different types of insulation. There are lots of different types, and they're all suitable for different applications. So our first one is quite common, is closed cell foams. These are polyurethane phenolic foams. They're probably the best insulator for thickness that you can practically buy. This application that we've got here is against a concrete wall. Stone wool, which is often called rock wool, it's often used in fire protection applications. It's got a very high melting point. It can also be used acoustically. It's not normally seen in residential homes, but sometimes there could be need for it. It is quite expensive. It's all made in Asia. We don't manufacture any rock wool in Australia. Glass wool is Bradford Gold, Fletcher Pink, and Knauf earth wool. Now, lots of people get confused because Knauf have excellent marketing team and they market earth wool as this fantastic material. It's a glass wool product. It's made from recycled bottles. They're melted down, a binder's added to glue it all together, and it's great. It's a really good product. It's cheap, it's used all around the world. Polyester is made in Australia as well. It's made from mostly milk bottles. There's no binders added in polyester. It's melted together, which makes the fibres really tough and strong. Also being basically a plastic product, it doesn't absorb moisture at all. Makes it great for situations like underfloor insulation, where you might have someone have a bath overflow, it spills out all over the floor. The polyester will simply dry out over time. It's not going to be affected at all. And then we've got polystyrene products, which are really common. Polystyrene's very cheap. There's a couple of different types, EPS and XPS. We won't get into the differences, but it's important to know that polystyrene is not just polystyrene. There is a whole world out there of different densities. It can be cut into different shapes and sizes. It's a really versatile material. Right, so when we're looking at the thermal envelope of a home, a couple of basics will help us understand what's going on. So hot air rises. Heat doesn't rise, hot air rises. So I don't know if any of you today are noticing the effect, but if you're sitting down the bottom versus sitting up the top, it is vastly hotter up the top. Yeah, it's very warm up the top there. As hot air rises, and this happens in our homes too, especially in split level homes, double story homes. The warm air rises up to the top. You might be living in a double story home where in winter it's beautifully warm up in the top level and freezing cold down the bottom, especially if you're on a concrete slab. The choice of construction material can really affect a home. So a lot of modern homes are built using steel frames. I think that's criminal, personally. Every time I drive past a new housing estate and I see them all going up with steel frames, I just cringe. Steel is way more conductive than timber, much more conductive. And so as an insulation company coming in and installing insulation around a steel frame, I really have a problem with it. Construction material and thermal mass can be used. It can also really affect a home. So a lot of older homes, which is what we're trying to focus on today, they're built on concrete slabs. Those concrete slabs are uninsulated. So you've got ground sucking heat out of the concrete slab. You're trying to heat the room, and that concrete slab is simply drawing heat out of the room, which is partly the effect that you get in a double-story home, which I see quite a lot, is the upstairs is beautiful and warm, and the downstairs is freezing cold. We've got these big uninsulated concrete slabs, these huge thermal masses just sucking heat out. And when we have periods of rain, the ground becomes more conductive, because water's quite conductive. The more water in the ground, the more conductive it is. Concrete's a terrible insulator. 200 millimetre thick concrete is only R0.2. It's really, and then that's not including steel. It's usually full of steel as well. And as we know, steel is 1,300 times more conductive than a piece of insulation. Almost no old homes built before 2010 would have insulation under the concrete slab. It's not something that we can really fix in an older home, but it's something that really needs to be considered. So most of the heat loss in a home is through the ceiling. Let's focus on winter. We're in the Highlands, really, summer's not too bad. Most of us these days, if you haven't got solar panels, you might be considering the future. And so most of the energy put into a home is in winter. That's our biggest energy cost. I like to focus on winter for homes, especially in the Highlands. And so most of that heat loss is through the ceiling with the hot air rising. You do get a fair bit from walls. Depending on how old the home is, drafts can be a really big issue as well. Right, so we need a priority list. You've got an older home. We've all got a limited amount of money to spend. What's going to be our biggest bang for buck? Draft sealing is the most important thing someone can do to their home. You can have the best insulation in the world, but if you've got a big gap around your door and cold wind blowing in, it's for nothing. So that's usually the easiest and cheapest. Door seals, window seals, floorboards, anywhere you're going to get a cold draft, that's the first thing to focus on. Ceiling insulation is next. That's not only because hot air rises and we get the most heat loss from a ceiling, but it's also usually pretty easy to come in and fix up someone's ceiling insulation or install it. It's pretty good access, it's pretty good bang for buck. If you've got a raised floor like this one we've got here, underfloor insulation can reduce effect called thermal stratification. We'll talk about that later. Walls can have insulation blown in, but wall blow-in is a complicated topic. You've got different types of walls, lots of different types of insulation. Walls function in different ways. So we might have a double brick wall, brick veneer, reverse brick veneer, and that's a competition on its own. Usually it can be done, it costs a little bit more. And then double glazed windows, as we all know, cost an absolute fortune. And for most people that I talk to, they're off the cards. When you might be talking about spending $3,000 to $4,000 on a big home, getting ceiling insulation and drafts done and possibly some underfloor insulation too. If you've got a lot of windows, you could be looking at $50,000 to $100,000 for double glazed windows. And it's off the cards, which is why I usually put it down the bottom. Not because it's not effective, it's really effective. It just costs an absolute fortune. So talking about drafts, this guy here is called a draft stopper, and older exhaust fans, bathroom exhaust fans, are one of the biggest sources of heat loss in a home. You can have the best ceiling insulation in the world, and then you've got an old exhaust fan which is just open to the ceiling, hot air rising, and it rises up like a chimney. So something really cheap with draft stopping is to install, it doesn't have to be this brand, but it's a little device that sits on top of an exhaust fan. They cost about $40 and take about 3 seconds to install. And it stops that hot air rising and you're losing it out of an exhaust fan. Most modern exhaust fans have a backdraft prevention device on them. Raven has an excellent website. Draft stopping is something that everyone can do themselves. Raven products there's thousands of products on their website. They're really easy to DIY. I would suggest anyone go onto their website and have a look. Ceiling insulation, we'll talk a little bit about that later. Underfloor insulation dramatically improves the surface temperature of the floor, which improves thermal stratification. So thermal stratification is the effect of hot air rising and it pushing down cold, dense air. So cold, dense air wants to sink. If you have a raised timber floor, it's going to be cold. Therefore, consistently drawing heat out of the air. So no matter how much heat you pump into that room through an air conditioning system or a fireplace or whatever heat source you've got, that hot air is going to rise and it's going to push down this cold air layer. That cold air layer is consistently going to form because you have a cold floor. And that's where underfloor insulation comes in raising the surface temperature of that floor. You no longer have the heat being there at floor level, and the heat can then fill the room evenly instead of having this consistent cold, dense air layer at floor. So if you sit in your home, a lot of us work from home these days, and feel that you're really cold around your ankles and legs, that's thermal stratification. That's a cold floor. That's dense, cold air sinking and sitting at floor level. So you might have the heater running, but all the hot air's up here at ceiling level, and you're living down in this cold air layer. There are various types of blow-in insulation options available for walls. You need to carefully consider the type that you're going to have done if you're looking at wall insulation, mostly because older homes are brick veneer. There's a lot of double brick, but I find in the Highlands, most of them are brick veneer. Brick is porous and that cavity is designed to be ventilated. So we need to be careful about moisture wicking across the cavity. One brand, for example, is Knauf Superfill. That's a great product and they've thought about that. It's a silicon treated glass wool. And windows, as you can see, in the R value of a single window is absolutely terrible. Windows often are measured in U value. U value is simply the inverse of R value. I live in the world of R values, and so I like to think of single glazed windows as R values. It's absolutely tiny. If you have a standard brick veneer home, brick will be, just brick alone is R 0.2. It's a hell of a lot better than a single glazed window. Now, what I'd recommend in terms of windows is we can't, even if you do have double glazed windows, looking at heavy curtains, blinds, pelmet. There are retrofit options available for double glazing. There are companies out there that will take out single glazing and install a double glazed pane inside the existing frame. It's another conversation on its own. There's also companies out there that will put acrylic panes over the top of existing windows. There you go. Right, so starting from the top, ceiling insulation is the most important aspect in the home after draft stopping. As we can see up here, this is a poor example of ceiling insulation as it is here. It's got lots of rat poo. It's a Bradford Gold glass wool product. It's probably installed 20 or 30 years ago. The rats have had a great time up there. It's also below the ceiling joist level. That's probably R1.5 to R2, and it's not enough for the Highlands. So this is what ceiling insulation should look like. In the Highlands, we shouldn't be able to see our ceiling joists. That's R5 that we've got. It's about 240 millimetres thick. A standard ceiling joist is only about 90 millimetres. So if you can see them, it's not enough. Ceilings should be completely covered with insulation. If you've got gaps, because plasterboard is a far worse insulator than a glass wool bat is, you lose exponentially a lot more heat out of plasterboard gaps than you would that are insulated. The general rule of thumb is that if you have 5% of your ceiling area uncovered with insulation, the insulation would only be about 70% effective because you're losing so much more heat from those gaps. Electrical cables here really should go on top or below the insulation. They shouldn't be sandwiched. They can get overheated. These are some bad examples of insulation that we see around a lot of DIY. Downlights, we've got a gap. And this downlight is specifically telling us, do not cover it. So this is another big problem we often see is cheap downlights can't be covered with insulation. Most homes might have 20, 30, 40, 50 downlights. You're talking 10% of the ceiling area might be completely uncovered. It's a big problem. I do recommend there is a cost involved, but I do recommend replacing downlights with IC4 rated. That's the rating. It's been designed to be covered with insulation. If you have your insulation retrofitted, we can cover it all. I bet you no one in this room knows what this product up here is, because even I don't know. We found that in a home in Bowral last year. I went up into this ceiling and I said to the owner, I've been in this industry for 13 years. I've done, every sort of building you can imagine. I've worked at nuclear facilities, I've worked at hospitals, like you name it. I've never seen that before. So we got it tested. I still don't know what the product is, but it contained asbestos. And so that is essentially some form of loose fill asbestos we found in a home in Bowral. I really wanted to talk about this because if you don't know what it is, get it tested. That's really important. Someone had installed brand new aircon up there. You can see in the top there's a new duct. So the aircon guys had been up in that ceiling. They hadn't thought twice. They'd spent time up there breathing in that dust that we later found out had asbestos in it. Down here, under a floor, we've got someone who's installed a vapor-proof foil membrane over the floor. The issue with this is that we never want to trap moisture. So any product that you're using, particularly in the Highlands, where we've got generally a low humidity climate, which means that the humidity inside the home is higher. As soon as you start trapping moisture, you can get condensation build up that can lead to rot and mould. These aluminium foil products are absolutely watertight. There's no air or water getting through them, and you can start to build up moisture, and especially in timber, you can start to get rot and mould. Foil is also an issue in ceilings. Next week, we're out in a home in Robertson pulling out foil-backed insulation out of a ceiling. People have died. In the pink-backed scheme a few years ago, a few people died in ceilings. That was because foil-backed insulation was installed in those ceilings. They entered the ceiling void. Aluminium is highly conductive. There was an electrical fault. The whole ceiling was live. That person went up into the ceiling. They were bodily on that foil and they died. They couldn't be retrieved. And terrible situation. So we do see it from time to time. If you've got it in your house, get someone to have a look at it. Don't enter the space. All right, so another code you might see on an insulation packet is this AS 1530 Part 3, and it's boring but really important because all materials are tested for flammability. Almost all products in Australia you will ever see are certified and meet this standard, but it's important when looking for it because it tells you how flammable a material is. There is a reason that I don't like to use polyester in ceilings. It's because it melts, and if you have a kitchen fire or even just, it doesn't actually have to have flame in a ceiling, it can just get hot. Polyester melts, and so looking at a product's tendency to ignite and propagate flame, it's really important. When you're reading a package, you should be looking for the zeros.
Sorry, I don't understand. So which one of those two numbers is the least flammable?
So the test itself, you want to look for the zeros. So this is 0 for ignition, 0 for propagation of flame, 0 for heat release after ignition, and the 3 is to do with smoke release. So realistically, you just need to look for zeros. The test is quite complicated, but just look for the zeros. Right. So older homes, they're very cold, but they're very easily retrofitted. Thousands of products on the market. Like I said, Raven has a really good website for draft sealing. They've pretty much got every product you can ever imagine, fitting for doors and windows, etc. We can get really good return on investment by retrofitting homes with insulation. Let's focus on the drafts and ceilings. They're usually the cheapest. They're the easiest. Don't forget that homes need to breathe as well. We don't want to trap moisture in our homes. Make sure you do some research. These are some great places to start. Tim Forsey has a great book. I recommend everyone go out and buy that book. It's really cheap. He's not trying to make a lot of money out of it. He's just trying to help people. And talk to professionals. We've got great professionals in the Highlands. Most of the builders out there, they really care. Do we have any questions?
What's your phone number?
I've got a card. See me at the end.
Quick question. With glass, and you were talking about single insulation or single glass
Yeah.
panel rather than double glazing. Is it true that there's different types of glass available now that have different thermal qualities?
There is, and it is one of those topics where the marketing teams are very good. It's a really good question, actually. So I'm not a glass expert, but I do understand the thermal properties of glass. So what you may, tell me if this is right, what you may be looking at, there's different types of glass these days where it's not actually double glazed, it might be a laminated glass. I'm not sure on the specific brands, I think people call it comfort glass or acoustic glass. There's also products out there like 3M make window films that put on windows on single glazing. My general advice with that is that thin products can never be good insulators. You generally need thickness. The only product that is very good at insulating in a very small thickness is vacuum panel. So they do make vacuum insulated glass. I have no idea how much it costs. I'm sure it's horrendously expensive. That's a honeycombed glass that's evacuated in between. It's still essentially a double glazed pane though. So any sort of single glazed, whether it be have a film in it, it be laminated, the thermal properties are not going to be very much better. They're mostly for acoustics, and really the only way to get the best thermal performance out of glass is to double glaze, triple glaze. The best double glazed window is argon filled with a low E coating on it, low emissivity coating, and that reflects heat back into the room in winter. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.